very much, Cathaoirleach. Leader, what I rise to talk about is to hopefully get some clarity about when the legislation for the regulation of e-scooters is going to be introduced. I know Minister Hildegard Naughton announced that it would be in the autumn of this year, and I think it's important to get that clarity as soon as possible. And the reason I want to get that clarity as soon as possible, and to give a wider context of other European capitals where this has happened, there was a lack of regulation in most European countries for e-scooters and active travel like that. And as a result, you're able to have companies come into capital cities and were essentially, there was no regulation, so it's a bit like the Wild West. They could do whatever they want, they could bring in these scooters, you know, the whole lot. I think it is so important, and I'm a huge advocate of active travel and e-scooters, but I think it's so important that we get the legislation right in Ireland to give the concept of e-scooters the best possible way to have a positive, you know, for people to have a positive view of them when they do come into the country properly. And the reason I do this is I attended the United Nations conference, the pre-conference on climate action there in Rome. And Rome was one of the countries where there was, or one of the cities where there was no regulation. And as a result, what you have is you literally have e-scooters littered all over the streets, parked absolutely anywhere. That causes a real issue for people with disabilities. It causes a real issue for people with visual impairment. It provides, it's nearly like it's like a form of litter as well. You're dodging obstacles on a footpath. And I think for it to be really to work in Ireland, for it to really have every possibility, because we have to change people's minds that this is the proper thing to do and it's an equally accessible thing to do rather than getting in a car. It has to be as flawless as possible. And I think one of the ways that it's as flawless as possible is in the up and coming legislation, we should be absolutely clear when it goes out for tender to these e-scooter companies that come into this country, that it has to be a case of that you have to leave it at a designated spot, like Dublin bikes. There has to be designated spots for e-scooters, that they're kept clean, they're kept tidy, and they don't present any visual impairments or obstacles on our footpaths when the legislation does come along.